You get that call that your mother has been murdered by her husband. What's going through your mind?
I feel like everyone is in such a state of confusion because my father loved my mother dearly. So we're utterly confused.
61-year-old Eddie McCollum faced a judge Tuesday on first-degree murder charges. He remains in jail on a $1 million bond.
WCNC Charlotte's Richard Devane is live this morning in Statesville. And Richard, the question, did their daughters have any insight into how this could have happened?
Yeah, Lisa, the family says they are shocked. They have no answers for what happened. We're standing outside the Well Worship Center here in Statesville. This is some place that their mother had been a member of and also a minister of this church.
She stood at the pulpit on Easter Sunday and preached about resurrection, about life conquering death. Hours later, she was gone. The man who pulled the trigger was the same man she had called the most amazing man of God just 4 years earlier. No prior calls to their home, no warning signs their daughter ever saw. Just a 911 call at 2 a.m. and a husband screaming, "Oh my God, I just shot my wife." So, what really happened inside that Charlotte home after the last hymn was sung? Hello, welcome to Crime Prism. Today, we are telling the story of a woman whose marriage everyone thought was perfect. A case that left the whole of Charlotte, North Carolina, and an entire congregation completely shattered. If you are new here, hit subscribe and let's talk about this, because this one is going to leave you with questions that don't have easy answers. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made it feel warmer. Pastor Tammy McCollum was 58 years old, full of life, full of faith, and by every account, absolutely devoted to the people she served. She ministered at the Well Worship Center in Statesville, North Carolina, and if you ever sat in her congregation, you knew exactly what kind of pastor she was. The kind that meant every word. The kind that didn't just preach, she lived it. Outside the church, Tammy worked at Ulta Beauty in Charlotte. She had a friend there, a colleague who had made a special appointment just for her. She was going to do Tammy's makeup for her upcoming birthday. Something to look forward to. Something to celebrate. But Easter Sunday, April 6th, 2026, was not about birthdays or beauty counters. That morning, Tammy McCollum took her place behind the pulpit and delivered her Easter sermon, Resurrection Sunday, the day Christians celebrate life defeating death. She preached with everything she had, her voice, her conviction, her spirit. The congregation was moved. Nobody in that building had any idea they were watching her final sermon. When the service ended, people hugged, laughed, made plans. The kind of warmth that lingers after a good church service. Tammy said her goodbyes and went home. She never preached again. Tammy was married to a man she considered the most amazing man in the world, a man she publicly called a man of God. Tammy and Eddie McCollum had been together for over 3 decades, 30 years. In February of 2022, Tammy took to Facebook and shared something that thousands of couples never get to say with that kind of certainty. She wrote, and these are her exact words, 30 years, y'all. I am truly blessed and honored to have been married to this amazing man of God for 30 years, and I'm looking forward to the next 100 years together. I love this man with all that is within me. That is not the post of a woman hiding pain. That is not performance. That reads like a woman who genuinely believed she had gotten it right. And Eddie, by all appearances, he felt the same way. Joyce Phillips, a woman who had worked alongside both Tammy and Eddie in ministry for 8 full years, said something that stopped people in their tracks after the news broke. She said, "The couple that I know, he really loved his wife. They loved each other." Eddie McCollum was not some distant, suspicious figure in the community. He worked as a teaching assistant for exceptional children at Southwest Middle School in Charlotte. He sat in the same church his wife ministered in. He was known, he was present, he was, by every visible measure, a devoted husband and a man of faith. Their own daughter, the child who grew up inside that home, said she never once witnessed any signs of trouble between her parents. Not an argument that went too far, not a tension that lingered, nothing. No prior calls for service at their home, no police report, no paper trail of a marriage unraveling, just 30 years, and then one night that erased all of it. Easter Sunday ended. The sermon was done, the congregation had gone home, And somewhere between the joy of Resurrection Sunday and the darkness of 2 a.m., something went terribly wrong inside the McCollum home on Cardington Court in North Charlotte. We don't know exactly what the argument was about. Investigators have never released the motive. But what we do know is documented, recorded, and chilling. At just after 2 in the morning, a call came into Charlotte 911. The voice on the other end was a man. He was not calm. He was not composed. He was barely holding himself together. "Hello, I need everything. I shot my wife." The dispatcher repeated it back, almost in disbelief. "You shot your wife?" And Eddie McCollum, 61 years old, husband of over 30 years, said yes. He had shot Tammy during an argument. His voice was hysterical. He was crying out to God, begging for help, questioning, out loud, why he had done what he had just done. At one point, the dispatcher instructed him to step outside the home with his hands up to meet the arriving officers. He refused. "No, I'm not leaving her." When police arrived at the scene, they found Tammy McCollum with a gunshot wound. She was pronounced dead right there. Inside the home, she shared with the man she had publicly called her greatest blessing. Eddie told officers the gun was on the stairs. Then detectives took him in for questioning, and he told them the exact same story he told the 911 dispatcher. Word for word, he admitted everything, right up until the moment he asked for a lawyer. He was arrested, charged with first-degree murder, bond set at $1 million. And on April 13th, just 1 week after Easter, a grand jury made it official. Eddie McCollum was formally indicted. The man who refused to leave her side that night was now sitting in a jail cell. And the question that nobody could answer, the question that haunted everyone who knew them, was the same question Eddie himself seemed to be screaming into that phone at 2 in the morning. Why? The news hit the Charlotte and Statesville communities like a shockwave. People who had just seen Tammy preach hours earlier were now reading that she was gone. Friends who had hugged her after service, colleagues who had laughed with her at work, congregation members who had been moved by her Easter message, all of them waking up to the same unbearable reality. The Well Worship Center released a statement asking the community to pray for the family. But prayer felt insufficient for what people were feeling. This wasn't a tragedy that came from outside. It came from inside the home, from inside the marriage, from the man who sat in the same pews, served in the same ministry, and wore the same ring. Joyce Phillips, 8 years in ministry alongside both of them, said she was numb when she heard. Not because she suspected something had been hidden, but because nothing had prepared her for this. The couple she knew loved each other, and now one of them was dead and the other was in handcuffs. Their daughter spoke out. A young woman processing the most impossible kind of grief, losing her mother and losing her father to a prison cell in the same moment. She had never seen signs of trouble. Never. And yet, here she was. A balloon release was held in Tammy's honor. People gathered. People wept. People tried to make sense of something that refused to make sense. Meanwhile, Southwest Middle School notified parents that Eddie had been suspended with pay. A grand jury indicted him on April 13th. The legal process had begun. But for everyone who loved Tammy McCollum, no courtroom verdict was ever going to answer the question that mattered most. What happened in that house after the last sermon? Here's what makes this case so deeply unsettling. Eddie McCollum did not run. He did not hide. He did not construct a story or try to shift the blame. He picked up the phone, called 911, and confessed immediately. He told the dispatcher, he told the officers, he told the detectives. Every single account was consistent. And then he asked for a lawyer, and the talking stopped. Which means the one thing investigators and the public needed most, the why, walked right into that silence and stayed there. What was the argument about? What could have possibly happened between an Easter Sunday sermon and 2 in the morning that ended with a gunshot? Was this the eruption of something that had been building quietly beneath the surface of what looked like a perfect marriage? Or was it something sudden, a moment that spiraled so fast that even Eddie himself couldn't explain it on that 911 call? Because that 911 call tells its own strange story. This was not the voice of a man who had planned something. He was hysterical. He was begging God. He was questioning himself out loud. That is not the behavior of someone cold and calculated, but it is also not an excuse, and it does not bring Tammy back. What we are left with is a portrait full of contradictions. A man who loved his wife, genuinely, visibly, for 30 years, and then took her life. A marriage with no police record, no visible cracks, no warnings. A daughter who saw nothing. Friends who saw nothing. And yet something was there. Something neither love nor faith nor 30 years of history was able to stop. The motive remains unreleased. The trial is ahead. And until Eddie McCollum speaks, truly speaks, the full truth of what happened on Cardington Court after Easter Sunday may belong only to him. Tammy McCollum's death did not just break a community. It cracked open a conversation the church has avoided for far too long. Domestic violence does not stop at the church door. It does not spare women of faith. And for Black women in ministry, the silence around it runs especially deep. Many suffer without ever speaking up. Afraid of being shamed, afraid of not being believed, afraid the congregation will protect the man before it protects them. So they pray through it, and some of them die inside it. Now, there is no evidence Tammy was suffering before that night. Her daughter saw nothing, her friends saw nothing. But that is exactly what makes this so haunting. If it can happen in a marriage that looked that unshakable, then the danger is closer to home for more women than anyone wants to admit. Experts say the church must stop treating marriage as something to preserve at any cost. Divorce is painful. What happened to Tammy McCollum was final. She preached about resurrection on the last day of her life. If her story wakes up even one conversation that saves one life, her voice is still doing what it was always meant to do. In the days after Easter, people gathered to release balloons in Tammy McCollum's honor. Her Ulta Beauty colleague never got to do her birthday makeup. Her daughter never got to see her mother grow old. Her congregation never got to hear another sermon. Tammy was 58 years old. She had a birthday coming. She had more sermons inside her. She had a life that was still going. And then 2 a.m. came. The motive is still unreleased. The trial is still ahead. Eddie McCollum sits in a cell while the people who loved Tammy are left to piece together a reality that still doesn't make sense. A 911 call that confessed everything and explained nothing. So, we leave you with the question that has haunted everyone following this case. 30 years of marriage, no warning signs, no police call, no cracks anyone could see. A man who refused to leave her side even after he shot her. So, what do you think happened inside that house after Easter Sunday ended? Was this a marriage hiding something the world never saw? Or was it one moment that went too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this video. Someone in your life needs to see it. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe for more stories like this one. Stories like Tammy's deserve to be heard. Rest well, Pastor Tammy. Your last sermon still echoes.